Welcome back to DS Trucks. In today's video, I want to talk about something that is controversial, and that is gear ratio. What is the best gear ratio to choose when you're ordering your truck? So if you follow DS Trucks for the last 2 years, you probably know that every truck that I've ordered has came with a 430 gear ratio over the last few years at least. And I've just been very happy with that gear ratio. You know, the way that it pulls, the way that it can plow snow and do a lot of the low speed work that we do in our business, whether it's plowing snow or hauling trailers around town. The 430 gear ratio has just been my go-to, but it's not always the best gear ratio to pick. And we have two examples here. We've got the 2023 450 and the 22 350. Different engines though. This one's got the 7.3 liter gasoline engine. This one's got the 6.7 liter diesel engine, but both have the 430 gear ratio. So what are some of the cons that come with the 430 gear ratio? So some of the cons would be the fact that your vehicle is slower. At the end of the day, the vehicle is just overall a slower vehicle, and that's a little bit of a controversial thing, because a lot of people are under the impression that if you get a 430 ratio or a lower gear, whether it's 430 or 488 or whatever, then somehow it makes the vehicle faster. Not necessarily. It ultimately is slower, and it ultimately has more torque. So if you were to do a lot of reverse maneuvering, which we do a lot of with the plowing and snow, sometimes you got to back up down a long stretch. This truck is pretty slow in reverse because it's a diesel engine. It's lower revving, doesn't run that much RPM like a gas engine. So when you put it in reverse and you step on it to go backwards, you will be at a pretty high RPM at about 10 miles an hour in reverse. So slower in reverse, but will pull a ton of weight in reverse. And the reason for that is your reverse gear is already a low gear, and then you put that with the 430 ratio, it's just real slow, but a lot of torque. Now with the gas engine, not as noticeable, because the engine can rev so much faster and so much higher of an RPM that even though it's slower in reverse, it doesn't really make that big a difference, because your engine just makes up for it so quickly, or so much RPM. And this is not an incredibly high revving engine. It's the 7.3. It actually revs a little bit lower compared to gasoline engines, but still with the 430 gearing, the slower reverse is not so much noticeable. And the same thing in general. This engine having somewhat higher RPMs, relatively higher RPMs compared to the diesel, even driving forward doesn't really feel necessarily slower. Whereas with the diesel, the 430 ratio that you get with the 450s, it makes the truck slower. At the end of the day, it's just not a fast truck like you would think from a new diesel. So don't be lining up with a 450 to race like a diesel 350 or 250, because if one of those trucks has like a 3.31 rear differential, which is available, that thing's going to really move out fast, because it's like having real strong legs on the bicycle, but never shifting into a gear where you can use that strength. So it's just, the 430 with the diesel is just really built to tow. And when we did a towing video recently, the 6.7 versus the 7.3, moving like 16,000 pounds, we were actually towing this skid steer right here. I felt that off of the line, the 7.3 was just a little bit quicker off of the line compared to the diesel, just because the gear ratio and the engine just revving a tad bit higher. Just normal driving, the 7.3 was a little quicker off the line. Now that being said, if I were to try to accelerate quickly with the 6.7, it would move faster ultimately. But just under normal driving, The 6.7 with the 430 gear ratio, it really kind of took its time and worked to the gears. That being said, the power is there if I wanted to step on it. Just under normal circumstances, it really is just a slower gear with this engine, in particular with the diesel engine. So the main thing though that I like about the 430 gear ratio, which is why I'm willing to give up some of the non-towing performance, because at the end of the day, the 430 gear does perform great when towing. Just when you're not towing, you do sacrifice a little bit with the diesel engine. But the main benefit though is the four-wheel drive is different when you have 430 gearing. When you're in four-wheel drive, you ultimately skidding on the ground a little bit. Kinda, I'm not gonna say it drives like a skid steer, but the tires do bind up on the ground, and they do have to scoot across the concrete or skid across the concrete or whatever when you're turning. And with the 430 gear ratio, it does that better. It just has gearing. The gearing's in the axles. You have more mechanical leverage in the axles. Your steering wheel is less bound up, and you're not getting hung up quite as much with the 430 gear. It just skids in the tires a lot easier, and it just makes the fatigue and the maneuverability better in four-wheel drive. And it's kind of interesting how that works and how it improves plowing snow. The 430 gear ratio, just for whatever reason, the leverage, the mechanical advantage being there in the axles just means that it just works better with four-wheel drive. And it's kind of interesting because I think about like this machine here, and this is a 2-speed machine. You hit a button, it shifts a gear, and it's all of a sudden able to move a lot faster across the ground. But when it goes into its faster gear ratio, it doesn't skid well. It just gets bound up, and it won't skid for you. It won't zero turn for you. In order to really zero turn it good, you have to be in a slower gear with more torque, and then it actually skids the ground better and maneuvers better. Same thing with the gearing in these differentials. Being in a 430, they handle the four-wheel drive better, in my opinion, from my experiences. If you're in four-wheel drive a lot, and you're never supposed to drive on dry pavement or any type of dry pavement, but at the end of the day, us snow plowing contractors, we spend a lot of time in four-wheel drive. We have to, a lot of times, put the truck in four-wheel drive if it's a little slick and send it. Whereas a lot of other drivers might say, hey, I only use my four-wheel drive if I absolutely need to, or I'll be stuck, or I won't use it. Well, for me, I run my four-wheel drive in a snow event for like the whole snow event for 12, 13 hours. And if I hit some dry pavement and I'm going straight, I'm just going to leave it in. And I've been doing that, and that's controversial in itself. A lot of people have trucks and they've literally never used their four-wheel drive ever, because it is a fear that, and hey, maybe at the end of the day you're just following the manual and you're doing what the manual says. The manual says that, hey, don't drive it on dry pavement, so that's what you do. So I guess at the end of the day, we're taking a risk, because if I hit a patch of dry pavement, I'm just going to leave it in four-wheel and just scoot across that dry pavement. I'm not going to shift out, because it takes way too long to shift out of four-wheel drive. And that's kind of when your damage can occur too. If you're hitting the binding situation of the drivetrain and you're in between a shift, that's not what you want. You want to actually not have it shifting when it's binding up, or if a wheel's spinning and then you're shifting and then one wheel stationary, that's not when you'd want to shift. You want everything to be rotating at the same speed and then shift. And sometimes you still got to like let off the gas and let everything synchronize up, but that's for a different video. But I guess the point of this is like the 430 gear ratio, or whatever gear ratio, is not meant for everybody. Some people are going to do a lot better with 3.31. Some people are going to do a lot better with a 3.55. than the Fords. And GM and Dodge have different numbers, but they're probably pretty close if they allow you to make that type of selection when you order. Which Ford, a lot of trucks allow you to make that selection, but in a diesel you have to have a 450 to get the 430 gear, and the gas engine you can get a 355 or 430. I'm not sure you can get a 3.31 with the gas engine, but it all comes into play. So the 430 gear means a lot higher RPM on the highway and lower highway efficiency, but potentially better city efficiency under 40 miles an hour. At 45, 50 miles an hour, you're in 10th gear. You're out of transmission. You're 10th gear. There's no more shifting for you to do 45 miles an hour with a 430 gear on the F450. With the 7.3, the same thing. You're out of gears. So if you're at a 430 gear ratio and you're traveling 45 miles an hour, you're in 10th gear. This thing's pretty efficient at that speed. And then you put it on the highway, you drive 75, 80. Now you're at 2,500 to 2,000 RPM to drive at the same speed that with a 3.31, you'd be at a much lower RPM. So if you're going to be doing a ton of highway driving, then the higher gearing in the rear would be better, because then you can get your RPMs lower on the highway, and you can get your RPMs higher. You can actually lock out the transmission and still shift or still achieve a higher RPM if you needed to tow something and not have the engine so low. And the computer will do that for you. If you're towing, I don't know, 16,000 pounds and you're going 65 miles an hour, and the truck's saying, hey, we need to be in 8th gear and not 10th, the truck pretty much does that, or you could just lock it out your own with the transmission on the column. So pretty interesting. The engine just turned off on this truck finally. Pretty interesting scenario with the differentials, picking the best one. Everybody's going to be different, but from my experience working trucks that do a lot of city driving, the 430 gears are pretty good, or maybe even a notch higher. With the 7.3, you can tow some weight with the gearing. The gearing really helps in those dump trucks. With the 7.3 liter gas Ford, they can have some sack, because they even come with lower gears potentially than the 430. And with a lower gear set, you can do everything, almost dang near everything that the diesel can do. The diesel can really get up there with the towing numbers, where you can tow 40,000 pounds. I don't know if you'd get there with the 7.3 gas, but that's a lot of weight to be towing, and most of us never get to that number. Where with the gas engine, 16,000 pounds towing does it no problem. It's not going to be a race truck while doing it. You're going to have to hang back a little bit and not pass somebody that you could have passed if you had the diesel or something like that. But at the end of the day, it gets the job done. 16,000, 17,000, 18,000 pounds towing highway, it gets the job done. But for low speed work, the 430 gear does work out good. I mean, if you're plowing snow and you're going to have a real big snow plow in front, 10 feet, 10.5 feet wide, pushing wet, heavy snow, then that 430 gear is perfect. It's just going to just keep moving and moving, and you're going to actually break loose on the tires before the truck stops. So comment below, let me know what type of gear ratio you guys run, which one do you recommend. And my name is Sean, this is DS Trucks. See you guys in the next video. Over and out.